Saussure told us that the relationship between signifier and signified is arbitrary, and that signs don't mean anything in isolation, only in relation to each other. Roman Jakobson came along a bit later in the development of semiotics and complemented and developed Saussure's work by introducing the notion of codes. Jakobson said that the meaning of a sign depends upon the code in which it is situated. Now, this might sound pretty obvious, but it's a crucially important thing to remember when communicating anything, especially across languages or cultures. If you're not careful, quite a lot can get lost in translation. Let me give you a few examples. Have you heard of the car brand Rolls-Royce? Well, way back in the day, to use a technical term, they launched a car called the Silver Mist. You can see where they were coming from, can't you? The two words work well together and they give you the idea of a somewhat mysterious and slightly out of reach product, which is exactly what Rolls-Royce owners wanted others to be thinking about the product they owned. But we can see where they were coming from because we're looking at it through the lens of the English language. German speakers didn't see it in quite the same way. I wonder if any of you speak German or can remember a little of any German you learned at school. If not, why not pause the video here and get on Google Translate to find out what mist means in German. So, not exactly the connotations a luxury car manufacturer wanted to be associating with one of its products, is it? Quite the opposite, actually. Following this rather epic feel, Rolls-Royce changed the name of their car to Silver Shadow, and everyone was happy. This is a great example of how careful you have to be with language, and the importance of researching word meanings or having someone in your agency who knows a lot of languages to make sure you don't make the same mistake as Rolls-Royce made. Let's now think about this through the lens of Jakobson's theory. The same signifier can refer to different signifieds in different codes, and this can cause significant communication difficulties and faux pas. Here are a few more examples of this happening. In the Rolls-Royce case, the issue was that a signifier initially used for a product in the English language code had a different meaning in another language code. In these cases, the issue is the opposite way round. We can presume that the signifier works perfectly well and appropriately in another language code, but doesn't when an English speaker tries to read it as part of their language code. I'd like you to do a task around this issue now. Here are the instructions. Perhaps you can think of examples you've come across before and try to think about those in the context of codes now. If you can't think of any you've come across before, why not pause the video and do a bit of Googling to find some? See if you can pinpoint exactly what's going on to cause the issue. You won't be able to give precise linguistic labels to that, so don't worry about that. That's what we're going to do next. I hope you found some interesting examples and had some fun researching them. There can be a lot of humour attached to these issues of confused codes. I'm now going to take you through a few examples and talk you through what the precise linguistic issues are with why the word doesn't work in the code. The examples are from a site with a perhaps questionable name that explores uses of English in Japanese, Chinese, Korean and other Asian language contexts. Check out this example. If you opened a cafe and gave it this name, you wouldn't be attaching connotations to it that would attract customers, would you? But vulgar comes from the Latin word vulgaris, which simply means common or of the people. So the intention here has probably been to give the cafe a name that relates to popularity or community or something similar to that. So the issue here is to do with etymology, the history of the word, or rather a word being used with its meaning from an earlier point in its etymological development, which is now defunct. And what about this example? The humour comes from us being used to seeing this signifier in a sexual or a biological context. Once we put it in the correct context though, it isn't wrong, is it? It just doesn't quite work. That's because the issue is one of register. You'll remember register from your earlier studies as matching your language to the context, and in particular to the formality or informality of the context. Penetration is currently only used in English for very scientific or technological contexts, so it doesn't work, or at least it feels very bizarre, in a context that is advising the public of something, where everyday language would be most appropriate. Likewise, this example. Again, our immediate referent for execution is certainly not the one intended here. But again, it's not wrong. To execute does have a current meaning, to put something into effect or to carry something out. Hence, any formal organisations you're part of probably have an executive committee. The members vote and decide on things, and the executive committee have the responsibility to make sure they happen, to put them into practice, to carry them out. Again, this is an issue of register because the meaning of execute is one that is only really used in quite formal contexts. It's also worth saying that in both of these examples where register is the thing that's causing the issue, we could also argue that etymology is at play to some degree as well. I say that because over time the English language has informalised, and the usages in these examples would have felt much less bizarre, if at all bizarre, a century or two ago. I hope you've enjoyed exploring these various ways in which words fit into codes or don't, as the case may be. I now want us to think about linguistic codes more broadly. We've already recognised that different languages are codes, and that different registers are too. We've seen that something that we recognise as very formal jars or creates humour in an everyday context. We've also seen to an extent that scientific and technological contexts have specific scientific and technological registers attached to them, in which words that mean something quite or very different in everyday language mean something specific in that register or code. Just think about semiotic terminology. That's an example of that as well. It's not just languages and registers that constitute linguistic codes. So do accents and dialects. Think about words you use that someone from outside Northern Ireland, or perhaps even outside your county, mightn't understand or might use differently. What's the crack is of course the obvious one, but there are others. Why not see if you can note a few down? And think about the way most people in Northern Ireland pronounce the word spelled P-O-W-E-R. For us, it sounds the same as the word spelled P-A-R, but for people with other accents, these two words sound completely different. So if they hear us use our pronunciation of P-O-W-E-R, par, they may think we're referring to P-A-R, par, and get confused. And let's go back to languages for a moment. Have you noticed that on official government announcements on TV in Northern Ireland that are signed, there are two different people signing differently? That's because one is using Irish Sign Language and the other is using British Sign Language. These differences are an excellent reminder that sign languages are their very own code. They are not simply based on the verbal language spoken in that place. American Sign Language is different again. Check out this clip of some differences. These differences occur because, just like with verbal languages, sign languages develop because of the cultural and social and physical shifts and developments of the people who speak them or use them. In the case of Irish and British languages, the differences are to do with historical separations in education, with the educators themselves having been trained in different countries. It's very interesting and you might want to research it further. Different subcultural varieties are also codes. Remember, for example, our discussion about wicked and sick when we were exploring denotation and connotation. These words can be argued to mean something different in the code used by the youth language community from their use by the general language community. We will explore more about how accent and dialect are used in advertising in the other videos this week. For now, I'd like to exemplify how different language codes can be used for connotative effect, even where the audience does not understand the code. Yes, really. Because we attach connotations to people and behaviours from different places, think passionate Italians and efficient Germans, we attach the same connotations to those languages by simply recognising that that is the language being spoken, without actually understanding what exactly is being said. Check out these two ads. One is a Stella Artois ad from the noughties that draws on connotations of rural French life, all rustic and family-oriented. The other is a more recent one for Specsavers that you might recognise. It draws on connotations of Irish heritage by using a traditional Irish song as a symbolic background track, which marries with the pure, simple and heartfelt connotations of the rural life depicted. In both cases, you might recognise some of the language. The Stella Artois one uses relatively simple language that someone studying French to a decent level at school would recognise. And in communities with any tradition of Irish language or culture, members often know and semi-understand songs even if they do not speak or understand the language as a whole. However, the key point to be made here is that even if you don't understand anything specific, if you can identify the languages as French and Irish, you will start to attach connotations to them.
Papa, désirez-vous quelque chose, papa?
Une fleur.
Voulez-vous autre chose?
Un peu de miel.
Encore quelque chose, papa?
Stella Artois.
Une Stella Artois.
S'il vous plaît.
S'il vous plaît, Monsieur Dubois est ici.
Laissez-moi vous aider, mon père. Merci. Par ici? Oui, oui.
Do not say